Welcome back, everyone. The next lesson this week is going to be about solving proportions, and it's very similar to what we did in the last lesson where we looked at equivalent ratios. However, there's a process that we're going to use to solve proportions called cross multiplication. And we have to use that process because it's not quite as simple as what we did last time, where we just looked at a fraction and we took a number and multiplied it by the fraction to create an equivalent ratio. However, we can do that with some proportions, and we call it the common sense method. So in these first three examples, what we're going to do is we're going to use the common sense method to solve the proportions. So if I look at this first one, I have 3/5 equals x over 30. And the common sense method, the way it works is we look at the denominator in this case, where I have a 5 and a 30, and I say, well, what did I have to do to 5 to turn it into 30? So we're kind of still thinking about that equivalent ratio thing. So I know that I just have to multiply 5 by 6 and it equals 30. That means I'm going to multiply 3 by 6 to figure out what x is. So I know that x is equal to 3 times 6, or 18. Okay, so pretty simple and very similar to what we just did in the last lesson. So if we look at another example, this one is a little bit backwards, but that's okay because the x is on the left-hand side. But we're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at the 10 and say, hey, I need to multiply that times a 4 to equal 40. So now I have some number x that I'm going to multiply by 4 to equal 36. Well, it's the same type of problem, except now we have to think about what number do I multiply by 4 to equal 36. Well, you could turn it into a division problem if you wanted to. But if we just think about times tables, it's 9 times 4 is equal 36. So x is equal to 9. All right, let's look at one more, and then you can try some on your own. Okay, in this case now the x is in the denominator, which is totally fine. It doesn't matter where the x is. We can still do this method when we have the x in the denominator. And I want to look at this and say, so we're going from right to left here because 6 times 10 is equal to 60. So that means I'm just going to multiply the 2.5 times 10. So x is equal to 2.5 times 10, or x is equal to 25. Okay, there are 3 that you need to try on your own here. So go ahead and try those 3 on your own. And when you are done with those, you can continue the video. And remember, these 3 problems are in a red box, so those are 3 problems that you need to enter your answers in Schoology. All right, next example is not quite as simple as the first 3 that we did. So with these problems, we actually have to use a process called cross multiplication. And maybe you've seen it before, maybe you haven't, but all it means is that we take the numerator from one fraction and multiply it by the denominator of the other fraction. So we have 16 times x, and that's going to be equal to the numerator from one fraction times the denominator of the other fraction. In this case, 10 times 24. Okay, so I use the different colors to kind of coordinate and be able to show you which ones go together. Now we can simplify this, and we have 16 times x is just 16x. And then 10 times 24 is 240. And now we just have a one-step equation where we divide by 16, and x is equal to 15. Okay, so it's as simple as multiplying a numerator by a denominator, which turns it into an equation, and then we just have to solve that equation. All right, let's look at another example. So in this case, we're going to do the same thing. I'll use colors again to help us figure out what's going on. So we have x and 18. So notice the x is first in this one, but I'm not going to write the x first. I always write the number in front of x because we like to have that number in front of the x. And then the second one is 30 times 39. So this is 30 times 39. And then I'm going to add an equal sign in between. And now this one, you might need to grab a calculator. So I'm going to grab a calculator just to be safe. And I'm going to simplify, and I'm going to say, all right, it's 18x equals, well, I don't necessarily know what 30 times 39 is off the top of my head. So if I grab a calculator, it's a pretty big number. It's 1,170. And then I'm going to divide by 18. And when I divide 1,170 by 18, I end up with x equals 65. Okay, one more example, and then you can try some on your own. Okay, in this one, the x is again in the denominator. The numbers are a little bit bigger, so maybe you need to keep that calculator handy. But we're going to cross multiply again. And notice how I'm always starting with the variable. Wherever the variable is, I'm starting with the variable because what that does is it keeps the variable on the left-hand side of my equation. And I like that better than having it on the right-hand side. So I have 25 times x equals, and then 30 times 15. Now some of you might be wondering, can I do 15 times 30 or 30 times 15? It doesn't matter because you're going to end up with the same number whether you multiply 30 times 15 or 15 times 30. Okay, so I'm going to simplify this. So we have 25x equals, well, 30 times 15. Yeah, you might be able to do that one in your head, but let's grab a calculator just to be safe. So it's 30 times 15 is 450. And then this one you could possibly do in your head too if you think about money, because 25 is kind of like a quarter, and 450 could be like $4.50, right? But let's use a calculator. So we're going to do 450 divided by 25. So when we do that on the calculator, we end up with x is equal to 18. All right, you have 3 more to try on your own. So go ahead and try those 3 on your own. They're in red boxes, so remember when you're done with those, you're going to need to answer those or enter those answers on Schoology. All right, the next 2 examples take it one step further. And when I say that, what I mean is you'll notice when you look at these that the x is no longer by itself. The x has a number that's along with it. And that's just going to make us do one more little multiplication step in each one of these problems. Okay, we're still going to cross multiply. We're still going to do everything that we did. We just have to do one more little multiplication step. Okay, so in this first one, I'm going to go for the x's first, and I'm going to use orange to identify 4x times 9 or 9 times 4x. And again, I'm going to make sure that x is all the way on the right-hand side. So I'm going to kind of do this one what you might call backwards. So it's going to be 9 times 4x is equal to, and then we have 24 times 6. Okay, so I can simplify this. The left-hand side I should be able to simplify because 9 times 4 is 36. But the right-hand side I probably ought to grab a calculator, so I do 24 times 6 on my calculator and end up with 144. And then again, I probably ought to use a calculator here because 144 divided by 36, we could probably figure it out, but why not grab a calculator just to make sure we have the right answer. So we end up with x equals 4. Okay, so notice we just had one more little step where we had to do 9 times 4, and then we could do the division to be able to figure out what the answer was. All right, so if we look at the second example here, are there just 2? Yeah, there's just 2. Okay, so again, same thing. I'm going to always go for that x first. So I have 12 times 100x is equal to 16 times 15. Okay, so again, we probably ought to use a calculator. 12 times 100, we should be able to do that one. So we just do 12 times 1 and add those 2 zeros. So it's 1200x equals, well, 16 times 15 is a little bit more challenging. So some of you might be able to do it, but then if you can't, that's okay. So we have 240. And now you'll notice that I'm going to be dividing by a bigger number. And when I'm dividing by a bigger number, I know I'm going to get a fraction or possibly a decimal. And the first thing we can do is just go to our calculator and do 240 divided by 1200 and hope that we get a decent decimal. And we do get a decent decimal. So in this case, it's 0.2. Okay, now if we would have gotten a decimal that just continued on forever and never stopped, we would want to maybe go back and just simplify that and keep our answer as a fraction. But in this case, it made a nice, neat decimal, so we'll take that. All right, you have 2 problems here to do on your own, and they're in red boxes, so make sure when you get your answers, you submit those on Schoology. All right, I think this is it. 2 more. Now these 2 add even one further step. Now in the previous ones, we had a number that was multiplying by the x. In this case, now we have a number that's being added to x, and we have to treat that a little bit differently. And the first thing that I'm always going to do if I see a number that's added to x or subtracted from x, what I'm going to do is I'm going to immediately put, that's not a very good parenthesis, I'm going to immediately put it in parentheses. And then I'm going to do my cross multiplication. So I have the 5, and this is a little weird because it's like so big. And then I have the 4 and the 2. Okay, so I know we have 4 times 2 on the right-hand side. And I have this first one, the orange. We're going to keep that x on the right-hand side. So we're going to put the 5 first. We're going to say 5, and then the parentheses x plus 3. And we're going to add an equal sign in the middle. Okay, so this one, it requires a couple of additional steps because we have to distribute here first. So we're going to distribute the 5 to the x and the 3. So we have 5x plus 15 equals 8, because 4 times 2 is 8. And now we have a 2-step problem that we have to solve. So we have to subtract the 15 and then divide by 5. So I'm going to subtract 15. So I end up with 5x equals -7. And then I'm going to divide by 5. So x is equal to -7 over 5. And if you grab a calculator, you're going to notice that that is equal to -1.4. Okay, so you can leave your answer as either one of these, -7 over 5 or -1.4. Okay, so the only additional thing that we had to do here was we had to do some distributing, and then we created a 2-step problem instead of a 1-step problem. All right, let's look at one more example. This one takes it even one step further. And when I say that, what I mean is that we have 2 x's in the equation, and what's going to happen basically is we're going to end up with variables on both sides of our equation. So let's go ahead and add our parentheses. And this one's going to be a little sloppy, so what I'm going to do is use a highlighter instead of trying to circle them. So I have the red ones there, and I'm going to go ahead and write the red ones. I'm just going to use a black pen, so I hope that's okay. And again, I'm going to put the 10 first, and then we have the 2x minus 3. And that's going to all be equal to the 7x plus 4 times the 4. And I'm going to put that 4 first and then the 7x plus 4 second. Okay, so this one, maybe looks a lot more challenging, but all we have to do is distribute on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute on both sides. So here we have distributing here, so we have 20x minus 30. And then we have distributing here to get 28x plus 16. And then I'm just going to solve this equation to get the variables on one side and the numbers on the other side. And in this case, I'm going to move the smaller variable. So in this case, the 20x is smaller than 28. So I'm going to subtract 20x from both sides. And so this is one where we kind of easily make some mistakes. So I'm just going to highlight this thing that we need to bring down. So we got to bring down that minus 30. So the minus 30 becomes negative 30 here. And then 28 minus 20 is 8. So this is 8x. And we have plus 16. Looks like I'm going to run out of space. Oh no, I got plenty of room. All right, so now I got the x's on one side. Now I need to get the numbers on the other side. So I'm just going to subtract 16. And when I subtract 16 here, I have negative 30 minus 16. So they're both negative numbers. So that means I just add them together and keep it negative. So this is negative 46 is equal to 8x. And then I just want to divide both sides by 8. And when I divide both sides by 8, I'm going to have to grab a calculator to do that. So I have negative 46 divided by 8 is equal to 5.75. So x is negative 5.75. And it's a nice neat decimal, so we can leave it like that. All right, so we took this quite a ways here in this assignment. We went from doing the common sense method, which is relatively straightforward. All we have to do is look for a number that we're multiplying by, to an equation where we had variables on both sides, and we had to do some distributing and moving some terms around to solve for x. You have two problems here, number 9 and number 10 in the red boxes. Make sure you do those and enter your answers on Schoology. And remember, if you have any questions, you can always visit us during office hours or send us an email, and we will set up a time to meet with you.